Everybody knows that they're supposed to be destroying Veigar in the early lane, but in practice that is sometimes a little bit harder than it actually looks like. The reality is, Veigar is a pretty challenging champion to punish, and in this video I'm going to teach you guys exactly how to punish him consistently so you can always beat him in mid lane. The key thing that Veigar has going for himself is that he is an immensely long range on his spells. His W and his Q are very long range, and his game plan in the early lane is to try to get through the early lane towards level 5 and level 7. These are key spikes for him because they give him an extra point in his Q, and Veigar is practically a one ability champion in the early game. His Q is his main trading tool with a pretty short cooldown. It's also the tool that he mainly wants to use to farm minions with so he can actually get stacks. But what you got to keep in mind is that his W is actually very inconsistent, almost impossible to land, and his E is of course a self-healing tool. So it's a one ability champion in the early lane, and that means that we want to be playing around this Q spell to see if we can heavy trade on him, because the goal versus Veigar is to beat him in the lane. We're going to do that by trading into him. Now, a couple of things to note, right? If his Q is basically his only spell that we need to be aware of, the way that you want to play around it is that you want to kind of bait out his Q. You can either do that by skill checking him, standing outside of the wave and forcing him to use his Q, and maybe you can dodge it. Another thing that you can do is you can actually bait him by standing close to low health minions, right? And that you then kind of incentivize him to Q, and then you walk forward the moment his Q is on cooldown. You can also just be a little bit less skill checky. You can force him to just Q the minions because he needs to do it to get stacks. And then you can just stand outside of the wave, away from the low health minion, and try to walk him forward and punish his cooldown. Punishing his Q cooldown and getting up space in the lane is one of the key fundamentals to playing into Veigar. I, funnily enough, really struggled with consistently beating Veigar in the past. And I would always just play on intuition, play on vibes. And what would happen is that eventually I would get like a 10 CS lead and I would just be doing fine, right? Okay, not exceptional, but okay. Until I played versus Veigar V2 in this exact matchup, Aurora versus Veigar. And what happened is that he was constantly spacing me perfectly. I could never get in range to throw my spells. He would go even CS, and eventually he would just beat me in the mid to late game because I wasn't ahead enough. He would just beat me in the side lane in one zone the moment he got some HP and was just stat checking me in itemization. So one of the key things that you have to understand about Veigar is a champion that has a really easy time of guiding back and killing minions at the same time. You need to kind of force him to step up, or you need to bring the fight to him. The mindset I could give you guys is the way you want to play with Veigar is you want to try to play like Mike Tyson boxing style. Close quarters, hard-hitting boxing. That's what we like. Sometimes just getting into range is tricky because Veigar can just kite back after he uses his spell. And if you then use your spell or you walk back because you need to CS, you can then grab up space like he's doing right here. And you can then just clear these minions from like a fucking million miles away with his long range Q. So a couple of things to keep in mind, right? Knowing that we need to bring the close quarters fighting to the Veigar. We can either do that by, of course, getting closer towards him, baiting out his spell, standing out to the minions, or taking up space in the lane. Or what we can do is we can actually let the wave come a little bit towards our side. And this is actually a very hard wave state for Veigar to just randomly clear. And the reason why that's so hard is because if you look at his spells, right? His Q, limited AoE. His W has AoE, but in the early game, not strong at all. And he's kind of bound to his mana costs in the early game. So I'm a really big fan of this wave state, and I would really want to see that close quarter action where Aurora just fucking W's at him right now and just starts slapping him in the extended trade. I think that this is a really good way of playing out this matchup. And this is what I learned from reviewing those VODs after I got clapped by Veigar V2 on his Veigar, right? Is that the best pro players that know to play into Veigar, they always take the fight to the Veigar. And if you feel like you cannot take the fight to the Veigar, you're probably making a wave management mistake, or you're probably not taking up enough space up in the lane, or just being willing to make the lane a little bit more fast. Pre-6, guys, you can make the lane as fast as possible. This guy will never be able to kill you or do anything. Post-6, you gotta be a little bit careful, of course, because then he has to execute with his ult. You do not want to let Veigar get to level, let's say, get to level 6, 7, haha, fucking hell, man. 6, 7 for free, because at that point, he is just going to be able to lane totally fine from a longer distance with a shorter Q cooldown, because every point in Q is a really big spike for him, because it gives him shorter cooldown, more damage, and he can just do 2 Qs and you're immediately into kill range for his ult. So you gotta be quite careful. So your job as a mid laner is to really punish him in the first 6 levels of the lane, before he gets to his breakpoints, and if you can get a significant advantage, you can kind of just stat check him from that point onward. As you can see, we're looking at an LCK mid laner bot, which is Roamer. He's not done an incredible job just yet, mainly because of the fact that he missed some abilities. He didn't really know how to get in range, and Veigar immediately built some flat HP, and flat HP is, of course, he's going to try to get some flat HP, because it's one of the best stats that he can get in the early lane to get through the early lane. He gets a lot of base damage through his Qs anyway. So most Veigar is actually going to itemize in such a way that it's hard for you to break through him. And this is why these first couple of levels like matter the most. That's like really where you want to deal the big damage to him. Now, what you have to keep in mind about Veigar is that this is a champion that really wants to get first to place, okay? Veigar really struggles whenever he's running into people. In the mid game, he wants to be first to place, let the enemies run towards him, block of choke points with his E. If he's first to the play and you're running into him, you're going to be in a massive amount of trouble because you simply can't enter properly. You're going to get poked. Like I said, Veigar is really good at kiting back and hitting you with his Qs and with his spells. That's where the big damage comes from. So always make sure that in the mid game, you play fights on your terms, on your tempo, and don't be shy to like drag him out a little bit into the side lane, especially if you got a jungler that can like fuck him up or a support that can fuck him up. That makes him a pretty free kill because he's pretty hard to kill, especially whenever he has no E. His E is like his own self-healing tool. If that spell is down, he's not going to be all that effective at self-healing. Other couple of things to keep in mind versus Veigar, right? You really want to be careful with giving him free stacks on his Q whenever there's no minions up, okay? One of the worst things you can do versus Veigar is actually step up to him whenever there's no minions that he needs to last it. Because then whenever you bait out his cooldown, he can just kite back, wait for his new cooldown. He doesn't need to step up, force a step up to play around the minions. So the way that you attack the Veigar, basically TLDR, is good quality wave states while then abusing his Q cooldown. That is kind of it. That is how you beat Veigar. And if you struggle beating Veigar, you probably have bad wave management or you're not abusing his Q cooldown and getting enough space up in the lane. Those are key things to keep in mind. If you get hit by too many Qs or you feel like you can't reach him, these are things to keep in mind. If you're a melee champion, right, holding the wave on your side is generally extremely effective because he can't unfreeze and you can just all-in him. If you're playing a longer range champion like a Syndra that can just hit him across the fucking screen, then it's totally fine to just slow push waves into him, just crash the waves on the tower and harass him in the tower. That's why mages generally tend to do really well into fire because they just outrange him. But whenever you play mid-range champs, you can kind of slow push at certain times when you can reach level up spikes. And when you're eventually in a position where you can hold the wave on your side, you can potentially all-in him. That is also totally a viable position. Make sure that you use your power, your multiple trading tools, because you got 3 spells, he's got 1 spell, to be in a position where you can get lane control and get first move into place. Don't be shy that if you get a lead, to just communicate towards your team that you want to be starting these neutrals. The faster you can make the game go, the better it's going to be. Giving Veigar 1 or 2 shutdowns that you don't want to give him might just lead into a position where it's extremely hard to close out the game because he can just farm clear waves from a really long distance and stack up infinitely. So make sure you punish him in the early game properly, and if you manage to do that, then you're going to be in a really good spot. Now, if you struggle versus Veigar, you probably also struggle versus Victor. So for that matchup, check it out right here.